Hello and welcome to another episode of Ahead of the Curve. I'm your host, Geoffrey Platt, and today I've got a good friend, Sean McChesney, online with me. He is a member of Electrosonic, so welcome to the show, Sean.
Hi, Geoffrey. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. So let's get things started. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you come from, how you get started, and how you got all tangled up in this crazy world we're in?
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely. So, as of last month, I actually celebrated my 7th anniversary with Electrosonic, which is hard to believe. But I graduated from grad school 7 years ago, and then immediately joined Electrosonic, actually into their apprenticeship program. So through that, I spent my first year with Electrosonic actually going through all of the different departments that they offer. So I started in the warehouse doing logistics, shipping and receiving. I spent some time in the field. I worked in the design department, engineering, project management. I even did marketing, procurement. But then actually towards the end of that, I ended up in the sales department in that rotation. I never wanted to be in a sales role. It had a bad negative connotation from my whole experience with anyone that was associated with sales. But I came to learn, how unsales our sales process actually is. I learned a lot about the business in that time, and I found out that being a consultant, I could actually leverage all of the things I learned from every different department to better help support our customers. So I did ask the company, may I join the sales team? And fortunately, they agreed to that request. So I
Did you
became a
say
sales.
fortunately or unfortunately?
Fortunately. Yeah, so that could have been a short career at that point. Um, but yeah, so I joined actually as a sales engineer is how I started out, and it was really an internal role, supporting the consultants at the time, helping them, price out labor, price equipment, spec out different types of systems, and how do we leverage Electrosonic to that customer, to that client. And then about 2 years ago, I left the Burbank headquarters and I moved here to the Bay Area to take on my current role. So now I'm an experienced technology consultant and global account manager. So
What
I manage,
exactly does that mean?
yeah, absolutely. So I support my customers and colleagues on how do we leverage technology as a tool to create a story, to create an experience. So Electrosonic will design, build, and support technology systems. How do we use that as a tool to create an experience for our customers?
Got it. So could you give me a little, just an insight as well for the viewers as to what exactly a integrator does?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a lot of different arms and a lot of different areas, that fall within an integration company. And when the word integrator comes to mind, I think the first things that pop into people's head is, they're the people that just take care of, get the equipment, install the equipment, and make sure things work. But
Yeah, so
there's just so much more to it than that.
I've been trying to explain this to my mom for 7 years, so we'll see if I figured it out. So, put simply, an integration company fuses audio visual hardware, control software into a physical environment to create an experience. So, really, the three main components of that are audio, video, and control. So, video would be, projectors, flat panel displays, direct view LED. Audio could be distributed audio, background music. It could even be assisted listening devices for hearing impaired. Control is all about what happens and when. So it's the triggers of the story arc for the guest experience. So we work with architects, content producers, and builders to support the narrative that creates a memorable experience. So it's really bringing all that technology together into the physical environment.
Where do those experiences start? Like, do they typically come from your end customers? Do you guys help and assist? Do you develop some of those storylines and concepts in-house? Kind of how does that whole process evolve?
Yeah, so a variety of different ways. Sometimes, it's an experienced designer or a content producer that has an idea, but they don't have a place to house it. They don't have an owner or an operator, if you will, that will actually take it in. Sometimes we're approached by the end customer and they say, we have 5,000 square feet. We want to bring in a variety of guests. Here's the kind of audience that we want to approach. Here's the story that we want to tell, or something that we want to educate our guests on. Wherever that starts, and whatever, the location or the size and scale, we're there to help our customer figure out how to use technology in creative ways to help support that experience.
Cool. So, what are some of the experiences, let's just say recently, that you've been working on, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had in creating those experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been involved since I moved to the Bay Area more on the corporate side. So creating experience centers, or briefing centers as they're called. They're referred to in a variety of different ways, but really it is almost a museum for a corporate environment. So a place that these large brands and large enterprise customers can bring in their clients and try to educate them on the services and products that they offer. But they want to do it in a more story fashion. They don't want it to be a sales pitch. They want it to be kind of this self-exploration, informative journey. So really, the challenges there is coming up with who's the audience, what is it we're trying to educate them on, and how do we use and leverage technology for that.
To be able to tell that story.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge there, a lot of these customers are familiar with the technology. They go to trade shows and perhaps they see a big, bright, shiny LED wall and say, I want that.
I want that.
The way that I look at it, it's we never want to put in technology for the sake of technology. If it doesn't serve a purpose or support the narrative, if it doesn't integrate into the environment, then perhaps it doesn't quite fit. We really never want people to notice what we've done, which is partly why it's hard to explain what a system integrator does. Chris Conti, who you're familiar with from Electrosonic, he used to always say,
I don't know that name.
Never. If the experience can be created with a flashlight and shadow puppets, why would you buy more than a flashlight? Which I know is a little counterintuitive to the whole sales process, but we're not here to just sell hardware. We're not here to just, sell the big ticket item. It really has to be meaningful. So I think the challenge is trying to align the goal of the client to what we know the value in technology to be.
Brett Ferris is online with me, and hey, Brett, we go back quite a long ways, and he says, happy to hear a version for tech's sake.
That's the truth. Yeah.
I couldn't agree anymore. We see, I think things are starting to evolve a lot more, especially in today's age, where the whole storyline and the whole point of being able to create these experiences really have to have a powerful meaning behind them. The ways of the past, I think, were more technology actually related, or technology driven, where somebody saw something really cool at a show and went, hey, that's really, really cool. I really like that. Let's put that into our next experience, our next exhibit, our next whatever showcase. And they've run into issues in being able to, portray or tell the story or portray the message that they really want to show. So
right.
In saying that, what are some of the areas and some of the experiences that you've worked on, that maybe has followed that line? Or have you had challenges where you have had customers that have totally insisted on using a very specific product or a specific thing, and you guys were like, well, I don't know, maybe this will work, maybe this isn't going to work?
Yeah, it's oftentimes where the built environment, whether it is built or it's being designed, it doesn't support that technology. So for example, projection just doesn't work well with high levels of ambient light. So even though it can create a really large image and be nice and crisp in a movie theater, it doesn't work outside. So direct view LED could be much more expensive, but if it's the right tool for that job and it would create a beautiful image on the outside of a building, if a client or customer is not willing to pay for it, we would rather talk them out of creating that experience, because putting up a projector outdoors, it's just not going to deliver the message how the customer wants, and it's challenging to have that conversation sometimes, but it comes from the experience of, being in this business for so long. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Brett brings up another good point. How does COVID play into your experience practice these days? And that was definitely something that I had on the list of things to bring up with you today. But
Yep.
we should just kind of jump right in because it's the world that we are living in now.
Yeah, I think what we're starting to realize is a space that used to accommodate 20 or 40 people simply can't. And I think at the underlying thing is people want a compelling reason to go into a space. Everyone has their different comfort levels, so it's about how do we identify what that comfort level is ahead of time and really use technology in a meaningful way to help support that comfort. So Electrosonic, we do the audio, video, and control design, but we also have design consultants for security and access control and surveillance. So how do we use surveillance, which again has a negative connotation, much like a salesperson? How do we leverage that to understand,
I'd hate to be a security salesperson.
I know it's basically the worst of both parts, but it's, how do we take that negative connotation and show customers that maybe we could create a heat map of your environment. If you want to maintain social distancing, how do we use AI or machine learning through existing surveillance systems to help people understand, are we too close? Are there too many people in this space? And then all of that plays into the story arc. So, spaces, the way that they're built, were originally intended to have a customer journey. So you come through the front door, you exit through the gift shop. That might not be the case anymore. So how do we make spaces that are malleable and flexible? How do we also make it so it could be a hybrid experience? Now every day it's Zoom calls, Teams calls, WebEx, you name it. If a client wants to have a C-suite come out, well, what about the presidents or the VPs or the product managers that aren't able to visit? How can you make an experience that caters to both the people in the room, but also those watching from home? Those are all questions that we're trying to figure out and understand, how do we pull non kind of AV centric technology? How do we pull building management? And how does that play a role in understanding, is the space clean? Is it filtered right? Or is the air treated? All these questions where it's kind of making us grow our perception of what goes into a space.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up because I was just thinking to myself, it was just a couple of days ago where I had to go and get some blood work done, right?
Yep.
And I really haven't been out a whole lot since pretty much March. We've only gone on trips that we absolutely really need to, right? So it's kind of the first time that I've really gone out into a more, I guess, quote unquote, public space aside from the grocery store. And it was interesting to see the approach that they took within the lab, to be able to bring people in, and there were different sets of comfort levels again, where people were still very comfortable sitting in a waiting room, with chairs that were spaced within about 6 feet of each other. And then there were people that had the option to go and wait outside, and it was just interesting to see that approach. And then also the way that they were cleaning the lab inside and the way that they were cleaning those areas, and that all kind of relates again back into the more public spaces and getting into events and experiences. Those different levels of comfort, I think, are really going to impact and play into how we experience things moving forward, and creating those different types of hybrid spaces.
Yeah, I was on a virtual conference for the Association of Briefing Program Managers, which is, again, the individuals that run and manage these experience centers. And someone brought up the idea where they have different bowls of different colored rubber wristbands that denote an individual's comfort level. So it's a very analog way to say, I have a red wristband. I wouldn't like to shake hands. Yeah, I'm not really comfortable. I'll watch. I'll stay in the back. I'm not doing the VR headset thing, whatever it may be. And, some people have a green wristband and they're happy to participate. So it's how do we bring that individual choice and comfort to the foreground of an experience, I think.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea, as Susie was saying. about having those different methods and different ways of being able to basically diagnose what people's different comfort levels are, as they are going through an experience. Just wanted to say a quick hi to Berto. Berto was my first guest on the show when I first kind of came up with this crazy idea, and he's been very supportive week after week. So thanks, Berto, for joining in with us today. So kind of getting into what we're experiencing today, how are you guys approaching it, from a design perspective, and how are you approaching it with your customers? I'm sure that there's been a lot of questions that have come up and have impeded the way that design might have already been done for a pre-existing project that might be coming up down the road. And how has that impacted some of the projects that you have had on the books, for things coming up, say, in the shorter term?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things that a lot of clients always ask is, well, how do we future-proof this? And I think the idea of
the question of all questions, right?
I know, exactly. So like the whole idea to me of future-proofing isn't about making it say, yeah, in 10 years from now, it's going to work perfectly. I think the goal of future-proofing is really trying to plan for the things that we don't know are going to happen. So a lot of the experiences we've made it pre-COVID had no idea that they were going to have to exist or operate in a post-pandemic environment. So really,
I don't think anybody saw that coming. I mean, It's just like there was a curveball and it was just thrown straight at us.
Yeah, we celebrated New Year's and then it just went left. But yeah, so I think it's, how do we really plan for nice, the social curator, future proofing, excellent quotes. It's so true. But yeah, it's, how do we give flexibility? So a lot of what we're seeing now is planning for, outdoor terraces. One project we're working on right now, it's filled with patch panels and audio systems and ways that that client can actually host an event outdoors now. We were designing for that, not knowing what they might use those terraces to do, or what type of entertainment they might put out there. Now it seems like they might actually have design charrettes and that sort of meeting out on the terrace because it's open air, it's a lot of room, you can spread out. So I think it's looking at the infrastructure that's in place. The third component or discipline of our design practice is ICT, so information communication technologies, and that is the physical base layer network infrastructure.
I like that abbreviation.
Yeah, so for years we've talked about the convergence of AV and IT. It's here. It's converged. It's all together. All of these bits and bytes are being sent onto the same signals or onto the same pathways. So how do we look at infrastructure in a way that helps us prepare for the things we don't know are coming? And I think it's going back and saying, okay, what infrastructure has been designed in? How do we utilize that or pivot the purpose of that infrastructure to create something new?
So what are your thoughts, just kind of thinking about that whole mentality about permanent versus semi-permanent installations? We start to see a lot of these pop-ups. Pop-ups become very, very popular inside of experiential marketing. Even Berto can input on this on the XR side. We've got extended reality. There's heavy pushes into extended reality right now and into virtual production. We're starting to see these stages being built all over the world. I mean, there's basically XR stages just popping up all over the place now. And what are your feelings, from more of a integration side and an installation side more than anything about, kind of semi-permanent pop-ups or semi-permanent installations to kind of guide the way into something more permanent?
Yeah, so we've done a variety of traveling shows. So it is an exhibit or an experience that is designed to be set up and taken down, but we design it in a way that has the same components as a permanent installation. So we're not doing floor cores or stubbing up through walls to hang displays or LED, but it's how do we envision road cases that can create an environment inside of maybe a blow up tent or something like that. So really the same design principles are brought in. It's, what's the story you're trying to tell? Who's the audience? Why are people here? What is it they're trying to accomplish, to learn, to hear, to see, to feel, to change? And then how does the technology support that? So a lot of it is, again, the infrastructure. What's the backbone? What's the core of the system? If we were to work with a content producer, if we could design content that can fit to a variety of displays or aspect ratios or mobile devices, or even stream it out to personal computers back at home, we could very easily take that one rack of equipment, drop it into any environment, add a few rental and staging components, and you have your experience. If a customer decided, I want to buy that, I want to install it in my own environment, you could almost in a way productize that experience and then install it into their IDF like you would typically do in a permanent installation. You connect it with more permanently affixed hardware components and away you go. But at the core of it, it's do you have a good story? Do you have a good experience that people are interested in joining, partaking?
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts as well? Let's just say about, we're looking at a lot of cross-platform. A lot of people are very dependent on their mobile devices these days.
Yep.
Hell, I've booked airplane tickets on the fly, well in the airplane terminal to get on a
Turn in
certain
left.
plane going
Yep.
to a certain place. And, we just become so dependent now of the mobile devices. And we're looking at a lot of different technologies now that kind of span across, different platforms. And it's almost expected to have these experiences and these technologies be able to span across a multitude of basically different displays or different devices. So what are your feelings about that, within kind of a newer space or newer immersive spaces? And what are your feelings about that kind of technology in general?
Yeah, so I think it's extremely powerful. We just had a demo on something called Free Touch the other day that allows existing content and existing touch displays to present you with a QR code. You scan that with your cell phone, and now you can use your cell phone to actually be the touch interface for the built environment. So things like that, where it's removing the need to touch something that everybody else has touched and giving it to your own personal device, so you can still have the same control and agency on the experience that you would have before. But again, it's keeping in line with your comfort level of the environment. The other side of that is, how do you broadcast something, or how do you stream
Mhm.
something that was previously, solely for in-person audiences. Um, there's all kinds of Skype bots and team bots and robots that you can drive around or guide from your station. It's almost like the SpaceX experience where you could try to dock on the International Space Station. Took me 3 tries. But there's a lot of ways where, like, obviously I'm not going to the International Space Station, but I was able from my own desk to kind of partake and have that similar experience. So again, a lot of it revolves around the content and how do we manage content in a way that is usable on a large projection or direct view LED screen, but can also fit the format of my laptop at home. What we provide is that technology to ingest and decode, encode whatever needs to happen to get it to that public audience. Um, I think there's a lot of exciting ways on how we can go about that. The Matterport camera, the fact that you can go through and basically scan and create a 3D model of any environment. I think
Mhm.
there's going to be some really cool advancements coming out of that. You've had a few content producers on here before, so challenge to them. I mean, I think that's kind of where it's going, is give me the choice of whether or not I really need to be there in person.
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of conversations over the past few weeks about volumetric capture and
Hmm.
being able to procedurally create content and be able to create environments basically on the fly. And I think we're getting closer and closer and closer to that. Technology is becoming much more advanced. We're seeing a lot more advancements. I should say, actually, right now, especially rapid advancements in software, computer vision. There's a lot of different technologies I think that are really pushing it. So I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with the viewers. If you guys have tried the SpaceX docking simulation, how many times did it take you to dock? Personally, I haven't even tried it yet, so I have absolutely no idea.
Well,
But
you'll have to
I've
let
seen
us
it there,
know
and I've heard
afterwards.
it's really, really, really challenging.
It is sensitive. That's my clue, and the tolerances are low.
So, in talking about some of these experiences, Sean, what are some of the expectations that you receive from your customers? I know that they're looking for their overall experience to be delivered in a way, and we always say that these experiences are never finished. But what have been some of your more challenging expectations from some of the customers that you've served?
Yeah, I think the classic answer
And
is,
that falls in with everybody, because like
yeah.
I can tell you, a lot of the people that are viewing right now know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about customer expectations.
Yeah, I think the hardest expectation would be the classic answer. We need it for less, and we need it tomorrow. It is it's extremely difficult to design and engineer and create these types of technology systems to support the experience in the way that it needs to be done. Um, we don't like to rush into projects. I've had some clients over the years where they say, well, look, we just need it up and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with it. And that's a very hard spot for me personally to be in. Because it's just, we don't want to just throw technology in for the sake of it and hope it works later. I've been through a lot of airports where you see a video wall where the color is off or a panel is out,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't even notice what's playing on it. And I don't want to put that kind of stuff out into the world, because like I said, my mom goes and sees it and says, well, that's broken, is that what you guys do? And I said, well, no, we try to do the ones that don't break.
Hey,
So
Sean,
it's
I'm walking through Terminal C in Detroit, and the
yeah, hey,
panel
could
was
you
broken.
yeah, so we take a lot of pride in the work that we do, so we don't like to rush it. Good things take time. uh, it's so that's definitely the hard part. And then obviously expectations on how long it lasts. Part of our business, we design and we integrate, but we also support post open. So we want to make sure that it that it works for years to come. But sometimes the amount of effort that it takes to maintain these systems, the customers or clients aren't interested in that, and they say, it's not worth the expense. It sounds like you're trying to sell me a warranty on a used car, but it's really far from that. Typically we end up getting the call eventually that it's broken, we're stuck, we don't know what to do, how do we get it to come back on? And then we're there to help. But I think those are the two big challenges: is rushing it on the inside or the front end of the job, and then not really understanding how to care for it on the back end.
Yeah, it's really interesting taking that approach, because it's kind of similar in live events, but in live events you've got one shot, right? You've got to set it
Right.
up, it's got to work, and you've got to be able to deliver flawlessly within the time that you have to be able to deliver it. But I think the point there being, there's a lot of similarities in the expectations to be able to deliver things, but those expectations are sometimes just you're just looking at it going, there's just no way we're going to be able to pull this off.
Yeah.
And I think you end up meeting some of those same challenges within the fixed installation businesses as well, right?
Yeah, and it's really just that level of care, and we can't put something up that's temporary. Especially here in California, the amount of seismic codes required to make sure that a rack is appropriately bolted to the ground, let alone putting a display or a projector over the head of an audience. I mean, there's a lot of care and time and coordination between us and the architect and the GC and the structural engineer, and there's a lot of sign off that needs to happen, and it just takes time. So understanding that, and that's why we like to be like any good partner. We want to be involved early, not just so we have a better seat at the table, but so we can bring a lot of this up. Had a project in the Middle East where we designed a beautiful projection mapping system. Come to find out, that's where they put the trunk line for the air handler. Okay, like had we been involved a little bit earlier, we would have just designed that projection to work differently, and we would have avoided the air handler. I'm not saying we need to move it, But just being aware of those little collisions that can happen in that physical environment, where there's just so many trades coming together to try to build out the space. It takes a lot of communication.
You bring up a really good point in terms of, pre-planning. I think a lot of people don't truly understand how much work really goes into it, especially from a logistical point of view and perspective, and how much planning is required even to do the most simple little thing.
Yes.
It's incredible how many times I've even been on site myself for a fixed installation where even the most minute little things have not been thought of. And I get there and I'm like, okay, so what's the plan for
What
the
do I
cable
do?
run for this? And they're like, yep, we totally overshot that. Or, support structures for projectors not even being thought of and being built on the fly.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely. And yeah, the idea of hanging a 98-inch display. I mean, they weigh 300 pounds. If you put that in the drywall, it's going to rip it off the wall. I mean, there's just little things like that where perhaps in a temporary environment, you can make some adjustments or concessions around that. But when it's permanent, and then not only seismic, but ADA compliance. So how do you manage all of those requirements and make sure that your equipment is within those bounds as well?
yeah, no, absolutely. All kinds of fun challenges. I just want to say I loved Erica's comment there. Amen to holistic design.
Yes. So,
Amen
uh,
indeed.
yeah, and it really is amazing to see, the different practices that architect firms have these days focused on technology. And I think one where it's about how do you use technology as part of the architecture. There's so much now, and LED, the pixel density has increased, the cost has decreased, and it's amazing what you can do with an entire wall or canvas of direct view LED. Some amazing projects happening out there, but it has to be integrated properly.
Yeah. And there's also a bunch of, again, unforeseen challenges to that. And again, some of the viewers could relate to this in terms of now you're rendering a lot more pixels
Certainly.
and your content demands have now become a lot higher. We're looking at higher frame rates, higher pixel densities for those displays, as beautiful as they are, but there's a lot
Hmm.
of extra work that has to go behind building everything to look the way it needs to look, right? And building
Yeah,
all those deliverables.
absolutely. And when we look at like creative monitor arrays, we really design pixel maps and help understand the physical space between pixel 1920 and 1921. So if a content producer is developing that raster, they could render all of that space as black. So they don't need to use all that GPU and CPU power and the time to render it. So again, it's all how do we work together? What's the end goal? What's the reality of the physical environment? And then how do we bring that digital aspect
Yeah.
into it to really shine? The stuff that we provide, if it doesn't have content, it's just a big black wall. And nobody really gets excited about dark rooms.
That screen could look really pretty, but it's not going to look really
I'll
pretty
tell
with
you
nothing
what.
on it.
Yeah.
So kind of moving into this era as well, we've been seeing a lot more, of course, focus on interactivity and being able to interact. What are your thoughts on interactivity within kind of the corporate spaces now? And what are your thoughts about, kind of having, I always called it reactive technologies because you're really reacting to what you're doing in a certain system. But what are your feelings kind of towards that and towards those trends moving forward?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, gestures and gesture interaction is still very difficult, and it's a little bit like, where's my skeleton, and am I actually doing this? I think the agency that a guest has in driving the experience is a very powerful thing. But if you miss the connection that the individual and the guest has to that content, it can actually be a very stressful experience. We also joke, I would I would bet most CEOs out there aren't going to go into a space, put on a VR headset, and have their whole team stand around and watch them try to, ride a toboggan or something
No,
ridiculous.
why not?
Like, there's, you go to trade shows, you see the children of the people doing those rides, and it's an amazing amount of joy that comes out of it. But is that really the right type of interaction to educate a customer on that type of, topic? there's the Cox Discovery Center was a project of ours a number of years ago, and there's almost a level of indirect interactivity where you can go into the studio around the back, you can have your photo taken, you can say how long you've either been a client of or a employee of that company, you tell a little bit about yourself, and then that content is digitally placed out into the lobby. So there's a lot of ways that you can get guests to have an interaction on the space and feel comfortable about it.
Yeah, absolutely. One more sponsor brought up a really good question here about sponsorships and the sponsorships working in those different interactive or reactive technologies. Sponsors want to have engagement with the overall experience as well. So what are your views and takes on that?
Yeah, I
we've
think
been seeing a lot of companies that have been playing around with it. I've
mhm,
seen some stuff lately from Nike and
yeah,
Coca-Cola that have been really trying to kind of engage and get into those spaces. Huge shifts right now in retail, which I wanted to bring up with you as well a little bit, uh, about technology being used inside the retail spaces, because there's been some really cool different projects that have been done inside of retail as well to kind of help engage. But what are your thoughts about sponsorships?
yeah. So when we look at an experience, there's really the pre-experience. So what do you do when you research it, you learn about it, you go on Google Maps and figure out how long it's going to take you to drive there? Um, how do you understand or set your own expectations for what you might do when you get there? I think that's a portion, one third of the experience where sponsorships can really play a big role in helping guests get excited and get engaged with the future experience they're going to have. Um, Inside of the building, it might be a bit more challenging, but I do think that if a sponsor has a good relationship with that brand, uh, they'll be able to create sponsorships within that content. But then the third aspect is once the guest leaves. And I think the Crayola experience in Orlando does a really good job of that,
I
where
love the Crayola
it's
experience.
amazing. I know. So I have two nieces, 5 and 2.5, almost 3. I can't wait to take them there. And it's that sort of thing where there's a whole buildup. It's amazing when you're inside of there. Digital painting, picking out your own color crayon, naming it whatever it is that you want, and then the whole experience once you leave. I think looking into the Crayola experience, that's an amazing example of sponsorships and pre, during, and post experience engagement.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really it's a if you guys have ever or never been to Crayola experience, one thing kind of calm back down. I highly
Please,
advise it.
please.
Whether you have kids or no kids, it's actually a
Right.
lot of fun to kind of go there, and there's a lot of history behind it. But that's a really good example of the synergy between creating creating something physical and the brand, but creating an entire experience to kind of promote the brand, right?
Yep.
So let's
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about retail and kind of the movements inside of retail as well, inside the retail space. I've been looking and researching actually a lot into this recently because I'm really interested to see how that whole industry is going to change and evolve from a COVID experience. I think that it's going to become a lot more experiential. I think that there's actually still a place for retail and shopping malls, but they could be completely overhauled and changed into more experience centers, to be able to
Yeah,
go shopping. And it could be really, really friggin' cool the way
it
that
sure
you
could.
engage with product and the way that you shop, right, for the future. So I know, and I'm sure that you guys have been working on some stuff there. So I thought that it would be fun to open the conversation in that
Yeah,
area.
I think admitting first that the role of retail has changed, where people don't go blindly into a store, look at what they have, and say, "Here's everything. Here's all the options that I have." I think retail is really more about an experience and how do you become engaged with a brand and with a lifestyle. How do you learn about the products? The Apple retail program is an amazing one where they completely changed it, and they put their whole team of people inside to educate people on the products, make them feel comfortable with the thing that they just bought. I think we're going to see a lot of brands shift that way. Lululemon just acquired the Mirror interactive workout partner product.
Mhm.
I could see Lululemon shops having an aspect where you can go and exercise in clothes and see if you like that type of yoga pant. I have no idea. But that's the sort of thing where I think it's not going to be just about buying a good. It's going to be about how do you use that good once you leave? How do you use that product to better your career or better your home life? The head of the product manager for Google Nest about a year ago had an interview with Forbes, and he said people never asked for smartness in a smart home. The thing that they really wanted was something that was intelligent and helpful. So how do we make our products be the helpful home, not just really, really smart? You
Yeah,
say, "Hey
yeah, I
Google."
don't know about the smart part. Here, wait a minute. Let me ask Alexa.
I know my Google just went off, but it's very smart, and it can tell me anything I want to know. But can it help me get a better night's sleep? Can it tell me when I haven't drank enough water during the day? Um, I think we're going to start to see retail environments bring customers in, educate them on why their brand can be helpful to accomplishing whatever it is they want in life.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at even technology is a horrible example. Well, actually, no, it's not a horrible example. It's actually a great example because we've got technology now that there's just so much of it. It's completely flooded. Consumer markets are so flooded
Yep.
with all these different types of either technology or, I mean, if you look at like brands of running shoe that you can buy and all these different things, and it's just flooded, right? Like you get overwhelmed, and now we're just spending our time really shopping through algorithms on Amazon and typing in some generic thing that we want, like toilet paper. Well, right now, of course, it's still.
And then it's like, hey, you looked at toilet paper. You might be interested in more toilet paper. Like, no, I already bought it. Like,
but I think the whole shopping experience is completely changed, and seeing all these brick and mortar stores disappear, big department stores disappear. But I just think that's actually just a sign of them not keeping up to the times. In all honesty, like. Experiences are what we're seeking. Live events, it's the same thing. We're always looking for those interactions and to be able to interact and experience things with others. And I think that there's a huge spot inside of malls and shopping malls to really leverage these experiences.
Yeah, I think what they have is an amazing amount of square footage. Previously, they were packed with as many products as they could possibly fit, which, the stimulus effect when you walk into it is like, I just need to use the restroom. How do I get through the perfume aisle, through the home goods section? Like, what do I do? Where do I go? I think with that amazing amount of square footage, we could see them put fewer products out and make it more of an experience, a third place to go and be outside of work, outside of home. And really, again, I think there's a lot of possibility in helping people learn about themselves and not being, hopefully, perhaps so superficial in the goods and products side of it. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's starting to change. Brett saying more Omega Marts from Yeah Wolf.
Agreed.
And Eric was mentioning, malls or stores as flexible third party or third places, perhaps. Which, I think it's a good idea and a good thing. So, kind of getting close to the time, but I wanted to ask you as well. You had some images here from One World Center about good examples of integration and good examples of installation. So I think what we'll do is we'll bring up the screen share here and just talk about that for a couple of minutes. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so One World Observatory was actually one of the first projects I worked on at Electrosonic during my apprenticeship. So I worked on it from design, engineering, project management in the procurement department. I actually bought a lot of the equipment for this. But this thing here I wanted to talk about because it is using technology to create an experience, a digital experience that literally doesn't exist in the physical environment. So if you've been to the One World Observatory in New York, you know that the building does not have an area where you can walk out over the street. The client wanted to recreate that. So what we ended up doing was taking live camera footage. We hung them in a weatherproof boom out over the edge of the top of the building. We feed that content back in live. We stitch it together. And what you're looking at here is actually an array of displays laying on their back. We knew working with the scenic fabricator that we had to somehow hide those bezels in a creative way so it would suspend the disbelief. So they said, well, let's make it look like steel girders. So they fabricated these pieces to perfectly line up with the bezels. They put glass on top of it. There's a little bit of a gap there.
Yeah, you
We
can
did
see
a
there's
lot of,
a little depth.
yeah, exactly. We did a lot of research on what camera focal length most closely represents how the human eye would see it from that level. Again, you're on the 102nd floor here. Um, I visited this space many times. It is amazing to watch people walk over it, and you can tell immediately who's afraid of heights. Because even though it's digital, there's about 4 inches between you and the ground there. People won't walk on it. They'll look from the edge. They'll kind of stand back. They'll hold on to their partner there as they walk through. Some people just stay right on the girders. And it's amazing to see because it all came together. You know, the GC, the scenic provider, working with us, bringing in the technology and saying, look, you know, I think we can make this happen. This originally started as a much smaller thing, then it was really big. Then we kind of found the happy medium of size that worked. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on, and I think this really speaks to being in early, designing it. They knew the experience that they wanted to create. We want people to walk out over the edge of the building. We can't, so how do we create it? I'm just really proud of this one, but I do think it speaks to all those little aspects of design and good systems integration.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. And it's such a wonderful concept to kind of create, and an experience to create too, you know?
Yep.
I always think that creating illusion is a lot of fun, and it's
Sure
kind
is.
of a specialty that we all have to have inside of these different creative fields and creating these experiences. I hate, well, I touch on it. I've been touching on it a lot, but you know, again, kind of getting into the extended reality parts of technology, a lot of that is kind of playing with people's deception, you know, by
Yep.
manipulating content and manipulating the camera angles and things to make you feel like something's happening that's physically there, but it's not, right?
Right.
So I always think that's a fun way to play with that technology and to bring that
Yeah.
kind of thing in.
Yeah. And I mean, people go and photograph it, and there is a possibility that people go and they never know that it's digital. And I think that's pretty spectacular. So
It's so much fun. So much fun. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the smart monkeys. I know they're online.
yes.
There's a smart little content about what smart part. I think we were talking about Alexis or
Yes.
Alexa and Google Assistant, but just wanted to say hi to those guys and thanks for viewing. So Sean, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. And I wanted to ask, where would people get more information about you and Electrosonic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best place, first off, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun this morning. But yeah, electrosonic.com. On our resources page, we have a lot of information about not only what it is that we do, but the partners, for example, Smart Monkeys, the people that we do it with, the people that we design and create these experiences alongside. But there's a lot of resources there. There's other webinars and blog posts that I've put together. But always, you know, you can reach out to me directly. My contact information is there through the website as well. But
We've actually already got Perfect. It ready for
you. You know, I love having these kinds of conversations. What's possible? What can we do? What can we create? Like I said, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but we can try to plan for it as best as possible.
Yeah, we can try and plan what's best for today.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Sean, for being on the show. Next week, I'm going to have Shannon Harvey on the show. We're actually going to be talking about content creation and content development for extended reality. We will also be talking a little bit about some of the technologies that are used in extended reality and kind of dive into that realm a little bit more, again, seeing as it's an area that a lot of people are working in today. So make sure to tune in again next week for that episode. Should be quite interesting as we kind of delve into those realms a little bit more. But once again, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you guys have as well. Thank you so much, Steph. And as I say every single week to you all, you know, stay up there, keep moving forward, keep going strong, and stay ahead of the curve. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.